Hello, Kyle and Elliotte. The pod is a staple. I rarely miss one. I think you're gonna like
Thank you, Todd. I like this guy.
Tim.
Oh, so you never. Thank you, Tim.
I don't know his name, but I really like this guy. All right, welcome to it. 32 Thoughts, the podcast, presented by GMC. Shramati, Friedman, Bukauskas with you. Regular season games are underway. Prague, Czechia, the host to a couple of New Jersey Devil victories over the Buffalo Sabres on Friday and Saturday. We'll get to that in a little bit. Also later on in the episode, the Thought Line is back, and we do a tour through all 7 Canadian markets, touching base with some of our colleagues and getting an boots on the ground feel of all Canadian franchises ahead of the beginning of the regular season. But Elliotte, you know where we have to start. How was your Sunday morning?
So Sunday morning, I woke up early to some beeps, and I kept on checking, and finally people started to respond that Jeremy Swayman and the Boston Bruins were closing in. And I really liked the way the Bruins did that with the arrival of the car. I thought it was a great piece of video. Again, the NHL social media accounts, keep going, keep pushing the limit, keep doing what you're doing. The content is getting better every day. I thought that one was fantastic. And I think what happened is, number one, the number one thing that I think everybody needed to hear from Jeremy Swayman was that all of the history was buried. He took the history, he dug a hole in the ground, like in the movie Casino, and he poured dirt over top of it. Because when you sign an 8-year contract with someone, you're saying, whatever may have happened, I'm taking the money, we're starting fresh, and we're all good. Like, the thing about the Amazon, as great as the Amazon video is, the tough thing for Swayman was it's something that he said back in May, and it's all of a sudden dumped on this situation right while it's hot. Right. It's right after what Neely Happ said. And all of a sudden, this is thrown into the middle of it. And it's like, Swayman will never get over it and stop whining already. I think Swayman set the right tone, and that is that it's over. It is over. I'm signed. I'm a Bruin. The past is the past. Someday when he writes his autobiography in 25, 30 years, he can put a chapter in on that, but now it's over. And if ever anyone asks him about it, he should simply say, okay, I signed here. That shows you how I feel about the Bruins. And that's what he had to do. But I really think that, when Neely said what he did, Swayman needed a couple of days to calm and cool down. Everybody did. Everybody needed it. And I think when Swayman cooled down and he thought about, what do I really want? What do I really want? He wanted to be a Bruin. And even though I think it was a rough couple days at the base, it never changed. And then, you know what it comes down to, Kyle? It's like when you have this kind of a negotiation where, like Neely said, 64 million and Swayman wants a certain amount, then it becomes all the, we know we're going to get this done, but what's a number that everyone's going to agree on? Because, some people are saying, well, the Bruins said 64. If it's $64 million and 1 cent, they caved. So right. Swayman wins. And then, Swayman initially was up in the 9s. And if he signs for $8 million, then he caved to the Bruins. And so then it becomes just everybody sort of mangling the metal to get the right deal. And look, it's a great deal. It's $66 million. Who's going to complain about that? So it's done. And I think there were some, I heard, but nobody will say anything, but I did hear there were some heart-to-heart conversations. And it's sort of like Aaron Judge when he stayed with the Yankees. They had to have sort of like one last conversation to make sure that this is the outcome everybody wanted. And I think that was the case here too. I think that when all the smoke cleared last week from what, Cam Neely and the Bruins media conference, everybody just had to sit down and say, it is our desire still, number one choice, number two choice, number three choice, that Jeremy Swayman stays with the Bruins and for a long time. And that's what everybody wanted. And at the end of the day, that's why it got done.
So, as you love to say, everything can change with one phone call. Was this as simple as ugly as it was this time a week ago, the players saying, okay, I'm ready to pick things up again? Or how did it all get back on the rails and across the finish line in the end?
Yes, I think that after Monday's press conference, I really believe that that it was all in Swayman's court, and ultimately he had to decide after what was said if he wanted to stay a Bruin or he wanted to ask for a trade. And I think once things calmed down, he wanted to stay a Bruin. Whether you liked or didn't like what Cam Neely said, the thing he accomplished with his 64 million reasons quote was he forced a decision. It forced Jeremy Swayman to sit down and think, am I in or am I out? And ultimately the answer was in. He thought about it. He was obviously upset. But when it came down to, do you want to ask for a trade or do you want to be a Boston Bruin? The answer unequivocally was he wanted to be a Boston Bruin. Now, I don't know if he called them first or they called him first, but I do think there were some serious heart-to-heart conversations, and he reiterated he wanted to stay. They had the deadline of the season starting, the effect it could have on the cap, the financial losses to Swayman if he wasn't signed by Monday night. But ultimately, Swayman wanted to be a Bruin, and he didn't want to miss games. And I think that's ultimately how we got to where we got to.
Okay. As you see, he was back on the ice Sunday morning. He wasted no time. There was the car arrival, and then you see he went on the ice at their practice facility.
Yeah, and he'd been practicing, and as he said, with Boston University, I can't see them throwing him in there on Tuesday night. I mean, talk about a hornet's nest. You haven't faced NHL shooters at all, and you get the Panthers on the night they're raising the banner. So I can't imagine he's going in there to start game one. But, we looked at the Bruins schedule. They don't have back-to-backs. They really don't have back-to-backs until the middle of or end of November. So they have time he's going to have practice time. He's going to have the ability to get ready. And I'm curious to see what they're going to do here in terms of, scheduling him and when he does make his debut. I don't think they're going to wait too long. I think you just reach a point where you kind of get thrown in there and say, okay, it's time. And you know what? Like some people were saying to me, the Bruins fans, they won't forgive. Come on. The moment that Swayman goes out there and has his first shutout, whether it's 17 saves or 46 saves, everybody's going to be just fine.
Oh, yeah. The heart rates in Boston have all gone back down to a resting rate again. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to Jim Montgomery and says, look, given the way our season ended last year, let me at these guys right away. Give me Florida opening night. I know I haven't been around. That wouldn't shock me in the least.
I agree with you, Kyle. If I was a competitor, I would want that. I would 1,000% throw me in that game. Now, as we all know, Bob Essence is the goalie coach there, and he's a really good one. So he's going to have a big say. Maybe, you know what? Now, part of me wonders, does a team say, you know what, Korpisalo was here all the way through and we don't want to risk the injury or anything like that? But, I have to say that's not the worst statement you've ever come up with, because you know how competitors are. They will want to be in that game.
Beautiful. So that's one thing to keep an eye on for Tuesday night down in Florida. So the Swayman saga is over. He is a Bruin for the next 8 years. How about the couple games we saw over the weekend, Elliotte? A pair of Devils victories, 4-1, 3-1 over the Sabres. You talk about team admins coming out firing. How about the Devils social? Did you see what they did with the O2?
Oh, yeah,
signage?
the O2. Oh, tough crowd. Tough crowd. Wow.
So Buffalo, Elliotte, we talked about no excuses this year, time to make something happen, and a bit of a tough start out of the gate overseas.
A bit?
A lot. Coming back home to Buffalo with no points.
Kyle, I don't like to overreact after 2 games. Never. It's 2 games. But, if I could pick one team, the team that could least afford to start like that, it would be the Buffalo Sabres. And it isn't just the losses, it's the injury. JJ Peterka, a really important player for them, suffers a concussion. I didn't think it was a suspendable hit. If anything, I thought it was a touch late. That's why I got the penalty. But it wasn't a head hit. The primary contact was with the body. That said, I hate concussions, and I hope Peterka is okay as soon as possible. But also, Benson gets hurt, although he tried to play through it. So does Obey Kubel. So immediately the Sabres have some concerns there. It's also, the way they lost too. Their whole camp, and Lindy Ruff coaches a team. He wants you to be tough to play against. The whole camp was about being tougher to play against. And then you come out and you lose the first 2 games. They kind of got pushed around. They got controlled by New Jersey. For most of those 6 periods, New Jersey was the better team. And one of the things about the Devils is they thought they got pushed around a bit last year. And they obviously had the sexy, attractive pickups, the Jacob Markstroms, who may have had the save of the year in the first period of the first game of the season. Obviously, Brett Pesce too. But there were some other moves they made, like Dylan. Dylan is a guy who, when he's on the ice, you're aware that he's out there. And the other guy I really like, and there's some recency bias here because he scored a couple of times, is Paul Cotter. And I liked Cotter at the time when they signed him last year. When Vegas won the Stanley Cup, he was a really good depth player on a really good team. And players like that help you win. They're not the biggest names, but they help you win. And I like that pickup. And, Seamus Casey, first NHL goal, gets the Rolex, great weekend for him. As wrong as everything went for Buffalo, everything went right for New Jersey. And the other thing, too, last year was, you remember Buffalo, one of the reasons they started so poorly was their goaltending wasn't settled. Well, that wasn't the problem here. Levi, especially, was tremendous in game number 2, and he kept Buffalo in it. Like I said, I don't like to overreact after 2 games. And then one of my buddies said to me, wait a sec, I hear you say that, and you're the guy who keeps the November 1st stat, aren't you? That if you're more than 4 points out on November 1st, you don't make the playoffs. So maybe you should be more concerned. And he's right to point out my hypocrisy there. But it already seems like it's late early in Buffalo. And, I see online that the Sabres fans are pointing out about the unsold tickets for the opener once they get back home. And there's still plenty of time to save this. And there's plenty of time to pull this back from the abyss. But you can feel after the way it went in Prague that the stress is already high in Saberland. You can't fall apart. You have to find a way through, but it's one of those things that you're watching that game and you're looking at it and you're going, oh man, like this can't go any worse. And it really tests you. It really tests you, but you have to trust what you're supposed to do and you have to find a way. You can't pack it in 2 games in. It's just not possible. You can't do that.
And you can see why the Devils are kind of the sexy pick in the East to do some damage this season. Sheldon Keefe, 2-0 to begin his tenure behind the New Jersey bench as well. So we talk about how big of a year this is for Buffalo and the pressure seeming to mount already out of the gate. Kind of feels like it's becoming a big season in Minnesota too, don't you think, Elliotte? So Kirill Kaprizov, next summer, he'll be eligible for an extension. It was last week, the owner, Craig Leopold, doing a media availability with the local press there, saying his line that nobody can offer more money, more term than what we would offer him when it comes time. What was your read when Leopold went out and said that about their star player?
So after reading those quotes, I was thinking, Kyle, that this is going to become one of the biggest stories in the NHL this year. For how long before Draisaitl signed were people debating his future? Same with Austin Matthews. Look at what we're doing with Mitch Marner. It's just when star players so rarely move in this league that when you get a situation where it looks like a star player might consider going elsewhere, people just glom onto it and they can't get enough of it. And so, Craig Leopold, I love the quotes. I thought they were really honest. I think they're completely true. But this is why, where Minnesota is, both at the deadline and next summer, the results they have this year, just the fact that these are out there means that there's going to be a kind of Kaprizov watch going on. Now, I saw Mark Lazarus of The Athletic. He kind of made an off-the-cuff comment about, I think Chicago, and he kind of had to walk it back because you forget that sometimes you make these predictions and then the fires of the internet start burning and they singe you all over your body. So, this is the kind of so I really look at Minnesota's year. And they're on notice, and they're admittedly on notice. Nobody needs to tell them that Kirill Kaprizov, they're going to have to show him that they're worth staying with. And you could always go into next season if you want. There's lots of ways this could go. And I don't really want to pour any gasoline on the fire with guesses or anything like this. But I've got down in my notes that, just watch the Wild and Kaprizov because they're on notice by their own words, which means everybody else is on notice too. And, Boldy got hurt, but the thing I noticed is it looks like some of their kids, like Ogren and Rossi, they had good camps. It's still early, but that's the kind of thing, they're going to need those guys to continue making steps if they're going to convince Kaprizov, even Wallstedt, the goalie too. There's another one. They're going to need those kids to convince Kaprizov that the Wild is where he wants to stay. So I'll be watching those young players as much as I'll be watching the results.
And the other thing too, this is the final year of the Wild paying that hefty cap penalty for the buyouts of Parise and Suter, right?
Yes.
This year, still almost $15 million in dead cap just to that alone. It goes down to just under 1.7 next season. So flexibility opens up to do more roster-wise for Bill Guerin and company. And though he's still 2 years away from a new deal, to create a situation for Kaprizov to sign there long-term, because it sure sounds like that's the team's desire. But you're right. It's a big time for them now after missing the playoffs last year, something they haven't done a lot in the last decade, but they came up short last year. So suddenly it feels like the pressure's on there as well to have a much better outcome here and to convince a guy of Kaprizov's caliber, this is where you want to be, and this is where you're going to have the best chance at winning.
And you know what, Kyle? Some of that will be part of their pitch to him. The shackles are coming off, no more handcuffs, even though obviously a chunk of that money will be going to him.
Okay. Let's go to Columbus next. So the Blue Jackets, couple of injuries at the end of last week. Their captain, Boone Jenner, Dmitry Voronkov as well. Jenner's coming in practice. They signed Kevin Labanc, who was on a PTO with New Jersey, to a one-year deal this weekend. But what are you hearing on the Jackets captain?
I don't like what I'm hearing. I believe he's going to go for some second opinions this week, which is, that's pretty normal. Drew Doughty did that before the Kings announced his timeline, which we're expecting to be around 3 months. Patrick Laine did that before they announced his timeline, which obviously he found an opinion that was saying we don't need surgery, and we can see if he can come back in a shorter time frame, which obviously he was happy with. We'll see what Jenner comes up with, but I don't like what I'm hearing. It sounds like a pretty significant injury. I feel terrible for Jenner, and I feel terrible for the Jackets, who have been through an awful time as of late for a lot of different reasons. It's such a fluke play. Like, you fall into the boards during practice, but I just feel terrible for both him and the organization, because it sounds like it's going to be quite a while.
Okay. Tough to hear. And yeah, as you say, Elliotte, Blue Jackets have been through enough already the last little while. So Sunday, number of names on the waiver wire at 2 p.m. Eastern. Anything catching your eye there? I mean, I look at a guy like Pierre Engvall, who's still got a lot of term left on the island. What stuck out to you when the names came across your desk?
Well, the first thing that made me think is it looks like Samuel Honzek has made the Calgary Flames. That was one of the first things that jumped out in my mind. And I like that. Like, it looks like there's a bunch of kids that are going to get the trial here. Yakimchuk, it looks like, is going to get it, you think, Kyle?
Seems to be. Gaudette, Yannick on waivers. I wonder if he plays opening night, but at least starts the year on the roster.
I would love to see it, because I really do believe if you make like plays should dictate. That's not the way the world works. We know sometimes it becomes who you know, or nepotism, or things like that. But in a fair world, Kyle, the best players, or the players who earn it, should make the roster. And to me, Yakimchuk deserves to make the Senators. Honzek deserves to make the Flames, and it sounds like Honzek has made it. So, great on him. The Engvall one is the one that jumped out. There's a few guys: Engvall, Hall, Anderson Dolan from Winnipeg, Brannstrom, Vancouver trading for him and then putting him on waivers. The thing about Engvall is, the Islanders know that nobody's going to claim him, and this is their way of, Pierre Engvall. Ask anyone who knows him. He is one of the most gifted athletes anybody has ever seen. Like, he just looks like a great athlete, and people who've played with him say that he should be a great player because he has every tool that he needs to make it and be a useful, very useful NHL player. But this is their way of shocking him, just saying, you know what, it's one of the last things they can try, and they're gonna hope that it lights the fire under him that they need. So I looked at a bunch of guys there and I was like, wow, those are kind of surprising. But usually that's what happens when you're sitting there and you're saying, what else can we try? I think there's some really interesting players on there. Janik, as you said, Kyle, I thought he had a great camp. I was really impressed with him. Rafai from Toronto, I thought he looked really good. I know the Oilers fans really like Raphael Lavoie. Jacob Pelche from Calgary surprised me a bit. Samuel
Sounds like he
Bolduc,
kind of lost his spot there.
Yes, he did. There's no question, but I was still surprised they did it. Samuel Bolduc, I had a couple people say to me that they thought that he might be the kind of guy that's worth a pickup. And Fagimo from the Kings. Now, he's been claimed on waivers before. He was claimed by Nashville last year, but he's a right shot. He's still a young guy. He's scored 40 goals in the American Hockey League. I always wonder about guys like that. And there's a couple more. Like, those aren't the only ones. But, one of the reasons that teams do it today is that they're banking that a lot of their opponents are sitting there and saying, you know what? We've got our roster. We've maneuvered the cap the way we need to maneuver the cap. And we have no room for any of this stuff. So I do know that teams do that. They say today is the day to drop someone on waivers that you're concerned about losing because other clubs might be too tied up in what they've done or too committed to what they've done to claim them. We'll find out. It doesn't always work, but it's kind of like your best odds day. I think the goalies too. Busi, to me, from Boston is a really interesting one. They put both him and Patera on waivers. You're obviously not expecting to lose both. Cooley from Calgary, he's one that I know a couple teams were kind of interested in. James Reimer's a veteran, not making a lot of money. Like, there are names on this waiver wire that make sense. It's gambling. That's exactly what it is. It's walking into the casino and playing roulette, saying, I've got to put this guy on waivers sooner or later, so I'm going to do it now.
Can I just ask you about the trade that the Canucks made on Sunday?
Yes.
Acquired
Yes.
Erik Brannstrom from Colorado for Tucker Poolman and a 2025 fourth, and then Brannstrom went on waivers immediately. Is this about
Yes.
cap flexibility
Yes.
with the unknown around Demko? Okay.
Yes, it is. And what it will do is that it's going to give the Canucks the possibility not to go into LTIR. They want to bank space. Like, they're like the Oilers. They want to add at some point in time. So they want to bank space. And this is going to give them a better chance to do it. And what the Avalanche are doing, like the Colorado Avalanche hired a new assistant GM. I don't want to break news that they hired a new GM this summer, but the Colorado Avalanche hired a new assistant general manager this summer. His name is Andrew Wilson, and he's been at the Central Registry for like the last few years. He's been at the NHL head office for like 20 years, but he was the number 2 to Sean McLeod at Central Registry the last couple of years. Sean McLeod, by the way, he's the ghost. He never returns messages, but he's the ghost who runs Central Registry. And so basically, whenever a team hires someone like this, they're looking for someone to do these kinds of things. And that's what, so because they did the cap, like the Canucks kept 20% of the salary. So what that's going to do, if you do the math, is that it's going to take Colorado close to the line. So so they've got Landeskog on LTIR, but they're expecting him to play. They don't have to activate Nichushkin's salary until he's cleared and out of the program. But it will allow them, so ultimately you can't go crazy acquiring people because you still have to activate these other players. So you don't want to walk yourself into one cap problem from another. But what this will allow them to do is maximize their cap for that flexibility. And that's what they've done here. It's a pretty smart move. Like, it's not anything I would have thought of, Kyle, because I'm not smart enough to think of stuff like this.
It's good. That's very mature of you admitting that.
You have to know your own failings and failures as a human being. And my list is long, and I am well aware of them.
Beautiful. Music to our ears, Elliotte. Okay, Elliotte, NCAA hockey and the relationship with the Canadian Hockey League. So on Monday, NCAA conference commissioners are scheduled to meet. One of the things they're going to talk about is to allow CHL players permission to compete in college hockey at the Division I level. I mean, a few weeks back, we talked about Braxton Whitehead of the Regina Pats sharing that he intends to play at Arizona State University next year. So this shouldn't necessarily be seen as a surprise. You talked about how this has been in the works for a little while now. So what happens next after they meet Monday?
Someone was saying to me today, by the way, Kyle, that when we were first talking about this a couple of years ago, people thought we were nuts for saying it was going to happen. And it's just,
Really?
Yeah, it's just stunning how quickly it has changed. When the NHL told their general managers last year at the GM meetings in March, we should have realized it was on the horizon, but I still don't think anybody thought it was going to be this fast. I think the thing is now, I guess an email went out at 5:00 on Friday afternoon, and that they're going to be voting today. And now what there seems to be a lot of chaos, like a lot of unanswered questions. What is this all going to mean? How fast is this going to happen? I mean, they're losing so many court cases, it was bound to occur. But I heard that when Arizona State committed to that CHL player, people were really mad at them because they were like, you're jumping the gun. It's too soon. You're creating hysteria where it doesn't need to exist. And now it just appears they were simply ahead of the curve and maybe they knew what was coming. But I think there's you know what's really interesting about this, Kyle, is that, we joke about your connection to the Canadian Hockey League with your brother working at the WHL, and there seem to be a lot of people who think that this is much, much better for junior hockey in Canada than it is for the NCAA. Like, a lot of NCAA coaches think we were winning this and we don't need this, and it's the academics who are telling us, or the administrators who are telling us we have to do this, and we don't want it. And, one of the groups of people I heard that are really concerned about this is maybe not the star players on an NCAA team, but maybe some of the guys who are a bit deeper down the roster. And they're worried now when these CHL players, when they're done up in Canada or in the Canadian leagues, they'll just parachute onto NCAA teams and they'll cost some of these players their jobs. And then where are those players going to go? Well, they could go to other schools. Maybe we'll get more teams created. That's my hope. Although one frequent listener of this pod says he's not sure there's the money to do that. Maybe they're going to end up in Canadian universities. Like, I'm hopeful there's going to be places for all these players to go, but others aren't sure. At the very least here, there's also questions about when can CHL players leave? Can they just drop out at any time? Or if they've signed like the education contract with their teams, does that mean they're bound to stay there until their junior eligibility is up? So, we knew this step was going to occur, Kyle, but we still don't have a lot of answers to how this is all going to work. And if you're an NCAA sports fan, not only in hockey, but in anything else, the craziness the transfer portal has created. The athletes have a lot more power, and I've got no problem with that at all, but it has been like a complete zoo in terms of players going here, there, everywhere. Like, you need like a mega chart, a really good Excel spreadsheet to figure out and keep track of it all. So I think that's the thing people are wondering here is how exactly is this all going to work? And is it going to lead to mega craziness with movement?
It's funny. I had a father of a player in the NHL who went the NCAA route before turning pro. And the father's obviously a big advocate of playing college hockey because of the education component to it. And his line that he tells people is, we don't need any more dumb athletes. And I just wonder about, like that you say, the trickle down effect and all the craziness, like how far and how many different tentacles does this all touch? I mean, we were just talking off air, the BC Hockey League. What does it mean for them now going forward? Yeah, there's a lot to this beyond what's going to happen out of that meeting and then the council voting on things later on in the week. That's just the tip of the iceberg, it feels like. Yes,
I agree with that. And there's going to have to be a lot of agreements made. I think it's going to affect older players more than younger. Ultimately, to me, I really hope what it means is more American schools playing hockey. We've talked about how Tennessee State is picking it up. There's a lot of places that kind of have club programs, like Vegas has a club program. I hope there's a question about how much money is truly available for all this. But what I hope it means is maybe a player who gets pushed out of one team's lineup finds somewhere else to go because there's more teams out there. But there are definitely players who are going to get squeezed. And those are the players right now, I think, who are most looking at this and saying, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. The BCHL, it's going to hurt. I wonder if some of those kids who get squeezed out of NCAA teams, maybe they end up at Canadian universities. And maybe they'll be able to get some more players. I don't know, but you joke about how I always say Colin Campbell's line, what's the law of unintended consequences? And there's a lot of that here, a lot of that potentially.
It's only just getting started.
By the way, you went
to watch. Yeah,
you went for a haircut today, right?
Yes, I did.
How long does that take you, just out of curiosity?
Well, Dino is meticulous, so it's close to an hour in the chair. It's close to an hour.
Holy cow. An hour in the chair?
Yeah. What are you? 5 minutes?
Not that long. Now, but the thing is, like, people who are in the chair for an hour, they usually get like coloring or maybe something designed into the head. Like, you're just getting a straight cut, right?
Well, but there's a wash and condition mixed in too. It's the whole experience.
Wow.
Maybe a little espresso if it's early enough in the day still.
Takes you a long time to drink it, eh? That's why you're sitting there for an hour?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You know me, I like to enjoy my coffee.
What did you say, by the way? Someone sent in their whole system into the thought line?
Yeah, Elliot, that's right. In the thought line this week, Josh from Scarborough, Ontario mentioned, well, he loved the fact that we take coffee equipment on the road, is fascinated by it all because he does the same. He actually sent a picture too of, he also has an AeroPress, travels with a grinder and a scale. And he's even got like a little briefcase, a protective briefcase for travel that it all fits into. I'm not that high end, but I was blown away. I'm
pretty impressed. Look, you have created, everybody's coming out of the woodwork now, Kyle. First we hear about the coffee. Next, we're going to hear about hour-long haircuts.
Oh, geez. Well, what did I say? I said there's a big community out there. There's a big community out there for coffee
and cuts.
Time-consuming haircuts. So that's going to take us to the final thought, which is presented by GMC. Okay, here comes playoff rapid fire, yes or no. We're going to go team by team through the divisions, one-timer styles.
All right. Okay.
I'll say the team. You give your answer. I'll give mine. You ready?
Okay. Yeah.
All right. We'll start in the Atlantic. Boston Bruins.
100% playoffs. You?
Yes. Big time.
Swayman's in. They're in.
With ya. Buffalo Sabres.
Well, I mean, it's almost like cheating, right? It's you're almost given the answers before the test, but I'm going to say no.
I will say no as well. Detroit Red Wings.
No. You know what? I didn't like I didn't like the way they ended the preseason, and I know that that's not always the way that it should go. But they basically had their whole team against Toronto. I wasn't crazy about that game. I'm not crazy about their goaltending. And by the way, just send all the best to Jack Campbell, who they announced was going into the program on the weekend. I don't know. I still think they're a year or two away. I really do.
I'm going to say yes.
You are, eh?
I'm going to say yes. Yeah. I did those games right at the end where they almost snuck in. I think they'll get over that hump now.
Okay. Bold prediction, Kyle. I like it.
Yeah. We've already submarined this rapid fire style, by the way.
Who cares?
All right.
I don't follow instructions. You know about absolutely.
I know.
They're gonna. Yeah. They're absolutely. Yes. They're in. Yep.
Montreal.
No, they're a no for me. Not ready yet.
No for me too, dog. Ottawa, I know yours.
I'm in. I've got them in. I am pot committed. I'm going in with a 2-7 offsuit. I am pot committed.
I'm going to say no.
Pay that man his money.
I'm saying no.
Really?
Gonna
Do you know
no.
that they might not let you into the building, eh?
I know. It's nothing personal. And if
I wonder who gives you this stink eye first. Green, Andlauer, Steos, Kachuk. Just let me know who gives you the first stink eye.
Good. It'll be a good revealer of who listens to our show.
That's true.
Tampa Bay.
Yes.
I'm saying yes.
Okay.
Toronto.
Oh, you paused for a second there. I thought you were. I'm saying yes on Toronto.
As am I. Okay, to the Metro. Carolina.
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I was curious because a lot of people are down on Carolina. I think it's too soon. I really think it's too soon, but a lot of people are down on Carolina.
They're just still a good team. You know what I mean? And I don't mean to borrow a line from Pierre Dorion, we're a team.
Yep.
But I think they've got a system that'll sort out their subtractions over the offseason.
Yep, I like them too.
Columbus.
No.
No. New Jersey.
Yes.
Yes. The Islanders.
No.
No for me.
But
The
you know
Rangers.
what? I have to say this. I just realized this. On the Sportsnet predictions that came out today, I
Yes.
predicted Patrick Waugh would be coach of the year.
I saw that, which kind of made me scratch my head. Not that I don't think he's capable of winning it, but I had a sense that you weren't particularly high on the Islanders.
So the highly disrespected Islander fans, and there's no group of fans that think they're more disrespected than the Islanders, are going to look at this insanity for me saying Waugh coach of the year and no playoff team and say this makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So I recognize the flaw in my argument. I may end up walking this back because I think that Waugh will have a huge impact in a positive way on them. But as I sit here right now, I'm kind of sitting here thinking and saying, who are they going to beat out? And I just don't have that. I don't have a bunch of teams that are going to beat out yet. Okay, so I'll stick with no.
Okay, as will I. The Rangers.
Yes.
Yes for me. The Flyers.
No.
No. Pittsburgh.
I thought about it, but no.
You did?
Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought about it. Yeah, Pittsburgh. No.
Yeah. No. No for me. And
Do you wanna
lastly,
put them in?
Washington. Well, I hemmed and hawed, but I mean, I've already got my 8 picks in the East here. And I think you do too.
Yep.
So Washington is a no for both of us.
It's a no for both of us.
Okay, to the West.
Clip and save.
To the West, in the Central Division, Chicago.
No.
No, not yet for me either.
Although I'll say this, I really like I didn't like what I saw when they played Minnesota this week. I think they had a pretty good roster there, and they got pounded, and I didn't like that. But they recovered nicely against St. Louis, and I don't know. You put the A on Bedard, and all of a sudden he starts fighting people.
I was gonna say I'm loving this side of Bedard, giving it back to guys. Good on him. Colorado.
Yes.
Yes. Dallas.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, no question. We could see a repeat of the Western Conference Final, I think, this year.
You could.
Minnesota.
I have them as a no.
Oh.
But I will say this. I had a real battle between 4 teams for my final Western Conference playoff team.
So you're saying Kaprizov is gone in 2 years. He's not re-signing.
That's good, Kyle. I like the position you're putting me in here. I think they go all out next summer when the shackles are off, and they find a way to do it.
I say they're getting in this year. They're a yes for me.
All right.
Nashville.
Yes.
Yes for me. St. Louis.
No.
I'm going no too. The Utahns.
I like that you called them that. I like that. All right. I think you have to have one go big or go home pick per conference. Ottawa's my team in the East, and Utah is my team in the West.
Ah, well done.
You know, I'm more confident about Ottawa in the East than I am about Utah in the West, but you can't just come. You can't be boring. You can't play it safe. Safe is death, John Tortorella once told me. So yes. You gotta. Every year there's at least one team that makes the playoffs kind of out of nowhere. Those are my teams, Ottawa and Utah.
Good. I'm going to go no, but they showed us something in the first half of last season before all the off-ice stuff just got too much. And
crushed them. Yeah.
Crushed them. So I don't mind your pick, but I'm still sticking with no. Okay, Winnipeg.
Yes, it was. I'll say this, like,
really, okay.
You know. I'll tell you what. Like, Kyle, I kept on saying yes. The amount of people that said no to me, I felt like I was doubting myself. I really did. I don't like to doubt myself, but I went with them. But I looked at them and I said, you know what, I'm sticking with what I initially thought. I think they're going to find a way. I do.
Oh, I'm going to say no.
Yeah, you're not the only one. Like I said, I'm in the minority on this one. I am definitely in the minority on this one.
Happy to be proven wrong, but my answer is no right now. The Pacific. Anaheim Ducks.
No.
No. Calgary Flames.
No.
I'm with you there. The Edmonton Oilers.
No.
Yeah, right.
I just wanted to see if you were paying attention.
Yeah, I'm an autopilot now. So we say yes.
Yes, of course.
The Oilers.
Yeah.
There's your one more bold prediction. The LA Kings.
I went no.
Oh. I'm going yes.
Yeah, Kyle.
Yes.
I'm kind of waffling.
Hold on. A wise man once said this is not a Waffle House.
That's true. He did say that. But, you know, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at Utah and LA and Minnesota and Winnipeg, and I just really struggled with this group of 4 teams.
So did I.
I don't like leaving LA out. I really don't like leaving LA out.
Just because of the pickleball, or is there more reasons?
No, I already took my L in pickleball.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, the Doughty thing. It's really tough with me. He's such a huge part of their team.
I totally get it, but man, I think Brandt Clarke is one thing. We've talked about Quentin Byfield and had him on the show, of course. I think it's coming for him.
I watched those games in Quebec City this weekend. He looks dynamite.
Yep, he sure does.
Like every time the Kings go out there, they get listed as the third line, and I'm like, that's the third line?
Yeah. Yeah. And Kopitar almost seems, I don't know if rejuvenated, because it's not like he's lost an incredible step over the last little while, but as much of the talk is of, is Byfield going to usurp him here sooner rather than later, he looks to be in no position of interested in letting that happen.
Yeah, which is great. It's just great for them. Yeah, I'm really struggling with this. LA, Utah. I'll stick with what I did, but I don't feel great about it.
All right. Brave man. San Jose.
You will be allowed to go back to Los Angeles next year and play pickleball. I will not. No.
That's right. I'll need a new partner. No to San Jose. Seattle.
I don't have them in.
Yeah, I don't either. They're going to be close.
You know what? And I bet you, and I'm also wondering if Eberle gets named captain there.
Okay. Well, you were bang on with Clayton Keller in Utah last week.
Yeah. So I wondered when they signed Larson if it would be him, but I think my pick is probably more likely Eberle.
Okay. That's a great one. So we're both no on Seattle. Vancouver.
Yes. And I think Vancouver could win the Stanley Cup this year. The thing for me is Demko. And I would not be surprised here. Like, Jim Rutherford does not discuss injuries. It's the one thing, it's like kryptonite to him. Like, JT Miller could have a hangnail and not miss a game, and Rutherford would not talk about it. My theory on Demko is they're going to hold him out longer than we're thinking. Like, I don't want to put a timeline on it because it'll go crazy, but I think they wait. I think they really, really wait. I think they're comfortable enough in Lankinen and Seelovs, and according to Ian McIntyre, who you'll hear, Seelovs looked really great in the preseason. I think they wait it out. They're patient, and I think they're going to add because that's what they do when they have a chance to win. I like Vancouver a lot.
I do too. And because of, you mentioned the tandem they've got as the stand-in until Demko is healthy, I think they'll get through it. Defense is more than good enough in front of them to make it all work in the meantime. They're in for me going away. Lastly, Vegas.
I have to tell you that there are a lot of people who are also down on Vegas. And
I can see it.
I said somewhere that I still think they can win the Stanley Cup. And again, I had like people saying to me, like, you're nuts. They lost a lot and they're not that good. And I was like, well, not that good. I mean, like they have great players on that team. As a matter of fact, I'll say this, like one of the Dallas guys was telling me that Eichel does not get credit for how good he is and how great a player he's become. I was like, Eichel, you mean like the number one center on a Stanley Cup team? Like people aren't aware of how good he is? But I don't know if people just don't like Vegas or what it is, but there are people out there who are really down on their chances this year. I still think they're really good.
I'm with you. I'm keeping them in. Going back to Mark Stone at their golf tournament when he was like, oh, another year, everyone writing Vegas off. They'll have plenty of motivation to be good again this year. So I say yes. So those are our picks, our yes or no's across the league come playoff time this year. So that was the final thought or thoughts presented by GMC. Elliotte, before we go to break, I know there's something on your mind and in your heart here on this Monday.
Yeah, a friend of mine from university just received just awful news in the last couple of days that someone I knew, Susie Stanley Diamond, passed away about a week ago. And I wanted to send my best and our best to Steve Diamond, Lindsay, and Cooper. Huge hockey fan, Susie was, and so is her mother, Mary. They never missed a game. They never missed an intermission, which could not have been easy with some of the stuff that's been said in our intermissions over the years. But it's a really tough time for their family, and I wanted to send them the best. I went to university with Susie and her brother Tim, and I knew Mary pretty well. So all the best to the Diamond family, and especially to Lindsay and Cooper.
Listen to the 32 Thoughts podcast ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Okay, time now for hockey's favorite audience participation segment, the Thought Line. The phone number to call, 1-833-311-3232. The email address, 32thoughts@sportsnet.ca. And Elliotte, we will begin this edition with a voicemail.
Hold on.
Oh.
Before we start,
You're always cutting me off.
Because you never give me an opening. But we did get some audience participation on what hurts more, a punch with a glove or without. And I have to say that of the responses I got, more people sided with you. It hurts more without the glove. I still disagree, but it doesn't look like I'm winning this argument.
Well, I watched Jack Eye and Zach McEwen throw down Saturday night in Ottawa, and I thought that didn't look any more enjoyable than if he had his gloves on.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking watching that.
I have to say you are right about that. I'm glad to see I have a good effect on you, though.
This is good. Yeah, it's all downhill from here. All right, we're kicking it off with a voicemail this time around. Elliotte, Trent from Chilliwack.
What's up, boys? It's Trent from Chilliwack. Go Canucks. I had to need a name and a location because last time I got through on the thought line, I forgot to do that, and Elliotte actually chirped me for being in the witness protection program. My question, though, is about money being involved in NHL trades. You know, back in the day, we've seen trades where Yager got traded from Pittsburgh to Washington and $5 million went back to Pittsburgh. There's also the massive deal with like a boatload of picks and $15 million cash being traded for Eric Lindros. So I'm curious if we will ever see this again in the NHL. Is this even allowed anymore? Love the pod. So excited for this season. Kyle, I think you're doing a great job. And one last thing, try the ribs.
No, you can't do it anymore. It's not allowed. And you mentioned, of course, the Gretzky trade, which was the big trade with $15 million in it. But no, I mean, the only thing you can do is teams can eat up to 50% of the salary in a contract, and you can eat 3 contracts at any one time on your roster. But in order, like trading cash, no, that doesn't happen anymore. It's not allowed.
And that's because of the salary cap that's now
yes.
part of the NHL.
Yes, 100%.
Okay, Mitch in San Francisco. Hi, 32 Thoughts team. Big fan of the pod. My question is, why does the NHL disclose less about injuries? For example, in the NFL, I can find out exactly what Christian McCaffrey is dealing with or ate for dinner, or at the very least, his whereabouts. Feels similar in the NBA, somewhat detailed injury reports from teams or local reporters. Not saying NHL reporters don't pull out this information, but it does feel like we tend to know less about injuries in the NHL. Am I right about this? Is there a reason, or am I crazy? Thanks, everyone. Yes, Elliotte. Injury disclosure in the era of many things in the NHL being brought to you by a major sports book.
If you are crazy, it is not because of this statement. That's what I'll tell you. The NHL is much, much more secretive about this stuff. And to be honest, like the question's been asked, not me, but I've heard reporters ask a question before. Now that the NHL is more in bed with gambling books and things like that, will there be additional information or clarity on injuries? And the commissioner's been on record as saying no. And he said that it's not going to change. Now, there are people out there who say, well, it wouldn't matter because players don't target injuries. I think they're totally wrong. I think they absolutely 100% do target injuries, because if you're on the ice in a big playoff game, you're pretty much fair game. However, I disagree, especially now that more gambling money is involved. I disagree with how secretive they are. And I just think that if you're anyone who bets money on games, you have to take that into account. I have had people who told me, and these are people who like to wager, that they limit how much they wager on NHL games because of this. They don't trust the reporting. It's just the way the sport is, and I don't get the chance that's going to change anytime soon. The one thing I'll also add to this, Kyle, some of my biggest fights I've ever gotten into as a media person have been when I reported injuries. And I get it. I don't always like it. I had a big one in the playoffs last year with Nylander just because it was such a crazy situation. But people in hockey are very sensitive about it because they do believe players will get targeted. So that's the best answer I can give you.
Yeah, Bill Daly was actually asked about all that last month in Vegas, said we haven't received any pushback from the sportsbook entities that they're partnered with, so it doesn't sound like anything is changing on that front anytime soon. Okay, next. Mike from his truck on the rigs. Keep mentioning gaining cap space throughout the year. How is that possible if you have a cap of $88 million to gain more? Really confusing. Please expand. Take care, fellas. Love the pod.
Basically, the way you look at it is you look at it like a bank. This is the simplest way I can explain it because it's the simplest way it was explained to me. It's like the more money you have in there, the more interest you accumulate. It's like that as a team. The more cap space you have, the more cap space you accumulate on a daily basis. It's like collecting interest. So that's the way I would explain it to Mike on the rig. I love the tagline, by the way, but that is the best way to do it.
Great. Last one. Tim from Calgary. We get a lot of entries from Calgary every week, by the way. They're very active on the thought line. Hello, Kyle and Elliotte. The pod is a staple. I rarely miss one. I think you're
Thank you, Todd. I like this guy.
Tim.
Oh, so you never... Thank you, Tim.
I don't know
love
his name,
this
but
guy.
I really like this guy.
Yeah. It's like the guy Charles Barkley got the bracelet from. Whatever your name is. Thanks for the bracelet.
Yes. Okay, I think you're going to like this one, Freach.
Okay.
I've been running a hockey pool for 25 years, and in 2019, I replaced my beloved goon category, which scores points for PIMs and subtractions for goals and assists, with an under 21 category using the NHL's September 15th cutoff date. This season, the top few U21s are easy, Bedard being number one. But if you were drafting late, who would be your sleeper pick for a U21 player? Do you want to start?
You go first. Let me think for a second.
So I'm assuming when he mentions the September 15th cutoff date is that if someone's turning 21 today, they would be eligible still to be in this U21 category for Tim's hockey pool. So with that being the case, a late pick who could help you in this scenario, I'm taking Pavel Mintyukov, the defenseman from the Anaheim Ducks. Had a pretty good year last year, though he missed some time from injury, but was almost a half point per game as a defenseman. I would take Mintyukov as a sleeper.
I don't know if your premise is correct. I just don't know. But I think it's a great choice. I think Mintyukov is a really, really talented guy. So I like that pick. To me, like Logan Cooley, is that a sleeper? Leo Carlson, is that a sleeper? Those are pretty high picks. You know what player I really like? I'm just curious to see where he's going to fit on the Capitals is Ivan Miroshnichenko. Like he was a first round pick who missed some time in his draft year, but he's a really talented young guy. I guess the other two I'd put out there, one would be Brandt Clark. I'm sure he's on a lot of people's radars and he's going to run that power play early. But the way people talk about Joshua Roy, he'd be another guy I'd look at. So those are some options for you. I tried not to name the obvious guys. Those are some other names that I would give you.
Fun one from Tim to wrap it up. That was the Thought Line, 1-833-311-3232, 32 thoughts at sportsnet.ca. Much love for all that submitted this week, and thank you to Griffin Porter for help curating the list for us. More 32 Thoughts when we come back after this. Okay, as promised, we thought before the regular season gets underway, at least in Canada on Wednesday night, we would take a little trip across the 7 Canadian markets and check in with some of our colleagues and get their sense of what's going on with the teams that they cover all season long. All right, we're going to begin in Edmonton, the site of last year's Stanley Cup finalists, the Oilers, and we are so pleased to be joined now by Gene Principe, rinkside host of Oilers Hockey on Sportsnet. Gene, first of all, what season is this for you now, working rinkside in Edmonton?
Wow, Kyle. Well, first of all, congratulations, on your, not that you don't do enough great things for our company, but now you've got another role and are wonderful at it alongside Elliotte. For me, I've been hosting the Oilers since 1998. That's when I moved back from Toronto. And back then I was working for what was called A Channel, which is now City Television, owned by Rogers. And in '01, I moved over to Sportsnet. So 23 years at Sportsnet. And the math is getting to be high when it comes to numbers. But I guess that's a sign of longevity. And hopefully everyone, if they don't love me, at least they can tolerate me.
If they don't love you, it's too late. It's not like you're going anywhere. Like it's just
like a marriage, right, Elliotte? It's too late
That's
now.
Right. That's right. It's too expensive and too aggravating to walk away from. That's right.
You know what,
That's
Elliotte?
right.
We're staying together just because of the kids. You know, the
That's
kids
right.
on the team. We're just
the grandkids. The grandkids.
Yeah,
now, Gino.
you're right. I remember when I started this job, and I was 31, and I would have been a little bit older than most of the players, but there were a lot of players in their early to mid 30s, and then you get to be the age of the parents, and then now I'm a bit of a tweener. I'm older than many of the parents, or some at least, but I'm not quite at the grandparent stage. So we'll see if we can get to the grandparent stage as the host of the Oilers on Sportsnet.
All right, here's the big question: Cup or bust?
Oh, buddy, it's Cup for sure. No problem, especially because last year it felt like a bust, even though, they made it to Game 7 and were, a post away, a bounce away, a break away from winning the Stanley Cup. So I really feel like these guys, they're not looking too far ahead, but it's right there in the back of their head and will slowly move to the front as they work their way through the season. These guys are focused, not only the players, but the staff, the organization, to come so close. It was different in 2006 because it really felt like a shot in the dark, a one-off that, it wasn't a belief that this was going to be something that they could have a chance of doing year after year after year. This is a belief that it is something that they can do, or at least have a shot of doing year after year for the next few years. So I'm going with Cup over bust, Elliotte and Kyle.
Very good. So I think of Connor McDavid's line about the main lesson he took away from last year is that you can't win it all right out of the gate. And we know the story of how they started last season after putting so much emphasis going into this time a year ago. How did you read how they managed the last couple weeks and gearing up for Game 1 of 82?
Yeah, Kyle, I don't think it's the kind of preseason that you would boast about. It was probably a little underwhelming for Edmonton, considering where they did finish in the Cup final in Game 7 last year. But honestly, I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm not shocked. There's a lot to unpack after that. And I think it's a lot easier to unpack when you win it than when you get that far and don't. So I have no concern. I don't think the Oilers have been as good as, fans will look at their preseason record. But I also don't think they're as off as people would think. And I know Wednesday night with an all-Canadian matchup coast to coast on Sportsnet with Winnipeg coming to town, that it'll be a great game and it'll be a great season for Edmonton. I think after a 16-game winning streak and what they were able to accomplish, a lot of people think, they'll be 8-1-1 in their first 10 or 9-1. It may not be that easy. There have never been easy games for Edmonton when you have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and company in your lineup. But this is a really good team who I think is going to have a really good season, even if the preseason wasn't quite what they might have expected. I remember the not so good years, and the Oilers would be 6-2 in the preseason. And then by, midway through, things were going so difficult for them that they didn't have a shot at the playoffs. So I would see this as the opposite, with lots of runway to come and a team that's going to take off soon enough.
Here's my question for you, Gino. You know that the Oilers are going to try to bank cap space and add. At the trade deadline, if you were to bet, what is the ad going to be for this team? Maybe not a name, but a thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. So Evander Kane is a bit of a question mark because we just don't know after having one surgery but fixing multiple things that were wrong with him, where he fits in or when he fits in. I guess that's kind of the question. I know he fits. It's just, are we talking January, February? And if it turns into February, March, then he is an incredible pickup at the trade deadline. I would say, from what I can see, that if there is something to be added, I would circle back to 2 deadlines ago when they picked up Matthias Ekholm. And I'm not, there's no Ekholm to be had, I don't think, at the deadline this year. But something defensively that maybe they feel they need just a little bit more of. And I only say that because they lost 3 of their 7 defense that made their way through the Cup run. So I think up front with Arvidsson and Skinner added, Henrique returning, Brown returning, Matthias Janmark returning, I just don't, I look at their 12 forwards and 13 and I'm like, what do they need? Now, this, of course, barring any potential big injuries, but I would say something defensively that they just feel they need that will work along their blue line if they are to make something big happen at the deadline, Elliotte and Kyle.
Gene, if there was one thing I learned being at Edmonton during their run last spring, Connor and Leon are the 2 big stars, but you are firmly the 3rd member of that podium in terms of popularity in that city. It's great. Well, with all that said, it's great that you made a few minutes for us today.
I appreciate it, guys. And hey, longevity gets you somewhere. So I guess they're happy to see you. In the playoffs, everybody's happy. There are no enemies unless you're part of the opposition. So I look forward to another long run and spending many nights, not only during the season, but in the playoffs alongside you guys and maybe on a couple of planes as well.
Well, I'll just say this. I know that in the Amazon doc, when McDavid is yelling at the players, well, he's not yelling at the players. He's yelling at you. Pick it up, Gene. That wasn't a game.
I better dig in. You know what? And we'll drop the expletives, but I'll definitely dig in for whatever season it's going to be for me and the Oilers this upcoming year.
All right.
Great. All the best, Gene. Thanks, man.
Take care, boys. Keep up the great work.
All right, we'll head to Calgary next and check in with Ryan Leslie, the ringside host of Flames Hockey on Sportsnet. One of the great libraries of impressions on the tour does Ryan have. Ryan, good to have you on here. What were your main takeaways? We'll start main takeaways from Flames training camp as we look forward to a new season for them.
Yeah, well, it was an interesting one from a standpoint of, I guess, just a different feel this time around, Kyle. Like last year there was this kind of cloud hanging over them in terms of the business that they had to do, much like every team every year has that kind of business. But with so many pending free agents last year, it was evident, given the way the direction of the team was going, that moves had to be made, significant moves, and saying goodbye to a number of significant players with a lot of talent. And that was the task of Craig Conroy. So this year, a lot of that business was kind of taken care of. It wasn't as though they had the same scenario. And I think what you're seeing in Calgary right now is there's just kind of a different feel inside that locker room where, all right, those who are here want to be here. Those who had to take their talents elsewhere have done so. And now it's sort of a lighter, more positive feel. Listen, this time of year, I get it. Optimism reigns supreme. But they're very realistic about what they want to do, and that is be a hard team to play against every night. They want to have this injection of youth, and I think we saw a little bit of that in training camp. Sam Honzik was producing some points for a young guy, and we see some various new faces in there, but some players that I think Flames fans are watching going, okay, is he ready to take a step? What does this year look like for a number of young players like Connor Zary, who had 14 goals last year? Is he going to progress and take another step in his career? What are we seeing from Jacob Pelche? That's a question too that at some point we should address. But just the idea that it's just a lighter feel around here this time of year, going into the regular season with some young guys who are going to get a chance to prove themselves to go along with a mix of guys who have been there. So I think a pretty realistic approach to the start of the regular season.
One of the questions hanging over the team is some of the veterans, Ryan. Now, I understand that Craig Conroy has said timeout. We're going to see how this goes before we make any decisions. Do you think that the veteran players are on board with that?
Yeah, I do. And I think they've been very professional from a standpoint of understanding the direction of this team right now. Is it a retool? Is it a reload? Whatever the word is that everybody can agree upon, you're seeing some change. And those players, like Kadri, who was fantastic last year, Blake Coleman, great year, Mackenzie Weegar, Rasmus Anderson. So there's some veterans here, Michael Backlund, of course, the captain, who are on board with where we are right now in terms of the situation. And got to see how this thing plays out, though. You know, like it really does have to play itself out. Are they all going to be here at the end of the year? Time will tell. But I will say there's buy-in, Elliotte, from what you're seeing out of these veteran guys who've done it before, guys who've won before, and guys with contracts, and who, you know, are here for now, and we'll see where it goes.
What's been your read on Dustin Wolf here now that the Jacob Markstrom situation got sorted out last offseason and he's now in New Jersey?
Well, it's an opportunity for sure. Dan Vladar says, I'll take it and run with it. Dustin Wolf wants to make it a difficult decision on a daily basis. And Cooley has been good as well in the preseason, so that was nice to see as well. But I still think Dustin Wolf has some work to do, and I still think that there's a great opportunity here. You mentioned Markstrom. He's moved on, and so there's a couple of goalies, if not three, who are kind of vying for some work. And, you know, I'm not overly convinced just yet that Dustin Wolf is completely ready, but he's certainly got an opportunity to take it, and we'll see what he does with it. There's some challenges for a goaltender with his stature. You know, Dan Vladar is a big goalie, and Dustin Wolf isn't. So we'll see how he navigates it. He had some time last year, but I don't know as though he necessarily said it's my job at any point. So last year, preseason this year, and into the regular season, Dustin Wolf's got a chance. What's he going to do with it? Time's going to tell.
What's your best outcome for the team this year, Ryan? Do you think the Flames are a playoff team?
I don't, but I don't think that is, that's certainly the goal for them. They want to get there. I just think you got to be realistic. And I think it's a team that can certainly, on any given night, beat any given team. But I just think consistently over the course of this season, we're going to see, and with some of the questions that may potentially be lingering in terms of those veterans, are they going to be sticking around given where the team is? And, you know, there's a lot of things that can happen over the course of the regular season. I think everybody in this market is realistic about it. I think inside those walls, they like being the underdog. They like knowing that people are saying, no, it's not for them. The rankings, what have you. They'll take it. They'll accept it. And then they're going to go out and try and use that. Not much of a big prediction guy, but I just don't see it at this point. And again, there could be additions. They've got cap room. There could be subtractions. It's going to be an interesting year in terms of the way people are looking at what they have in the system, younger players. I think a lot of people are really curious about, the regular season, what it's going to mean, the direction, where they're going to position themselves, either in the standings or with some of the talent that they do have. So, again, not much of a prediction guy, but, I think everybody here is pretty realistic about where they are in this retool and accept that. And we'll go to the rink on a nightly basis and watch the games on a regular basis to see who's doing what and see how it all shakes down. And over the course of a year, like so many other teams that either are going to be competing for a playoff spot, which I think you could be in and around that conversation, but there's a lot of time and a lot of work to be done here. And I think inside that locker room, that's their goal, understandably. And you know what? They still have a lot of talented pieces. So we'll see how it goes. But it's going to be a challenging year in the win column. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's how you're going to gauge it, I think, if you're watching this team.
Good stuff, Ryan. Hey, have you picked out a rookie dinner spot for John Abbott yet?
Well, there is some talk of Utah. We're there at the end of the month, and excited to have John on board. And so it'll be a Vegas and Utah scenario. And, oh, man, yeah, that'll be our first time there, obviously, and I'm looking forward to it. John's a good man, really excited to get working with him, and happy that he's here. I know he's pretty excited and getting his family situated here, and yeah, it's a lot, but I think he's up for the challenge, that's for sure.
Now, I understand with Rick Ball not there, the price of wine just went down. Is that true?
Very fair, and we're all... Sad to see Rick go, but kids can afford to go to college now. It's that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure Kelly will still give it the old college try, and it's losing Rick. He was just so great to have on the road, and his tastes were very extravagant in terms of a good steak and a good glass of wine, but I'm sure John Abbott can bring it as well. So looking forward to it. It's, a new guy in the booth, and, somebody who's been in NHL markets and Vancouver and Ottawa, and, he's got a lot of experience under his belt. So it's going to be fun, but yeah, we'll have to stick him with a tab or two. Maybe a little credit card roulette.
Yes, always on the table. Ryan, have a great season. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Okay, from Calgary out to Montreal. Eric Engels of Sportsnet.ca joins us here now. Eric, preseason treat you well. How are you doing?
Preseason treated me very well. Probably a lot better than some of the players on the Montreal Canadiens who ended up on gurneys after that one game. But I think we're all happy that it's over.
Yeah, well, that's where I wanted to start. I mean, of course, the injury to Laine, Reinbacher to a certain extent, was that enough to take the wind out of the sails after there seemed to be legitimate buzz coming into camp? Or do you believe this team is better equipped than in years past to withstand all that?
Yeah, I think it depends who you ask. If you ask the fans, I'm sure some of the wind was taken out of the sails. If you ask management, the coaching staff, who would probably like to put a positive spin on it, I thought they saw Laine as a guy that could boost what they had around them this year, but the main emphasis on them taking a step was based on their young core having one more year of experience under their belt. So you look at guys like Arbor Jacki and Caden Gooley and Justin Barron, Jaden Struble on the back end. You look at Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield and Juraj Slavkovsky and Kirby Dach coming back. I think the Canadiens' sense of optimism that they could, quote unquote, be in the mix and achieve that goal this season is based around the maturity of that young core. Now, losing Patrick Laine, I think, is less about the player himself, not that he wouldn't have been productive with the Canadiens through the first few months of the season, but more about the fact that you had a more rounded top six to insulate what is a much deeper bottom six with guys like Gallagher and Anderson and Armia down there and Evans and Dvorak. Now, a lot of people would look from the outside and say, well, they're paying too much money for those guys to be in the bottom six, but when you could afford it, it doesn't matter, and it becomes an advantage if they're well insulated. So I'm curious to see how it works out from a secondary scoring perspective, and also how that depth ends up following through now that a little bit of insulation has been taken away with Laine's injury.
I'm curious about the defense. I know you're a big Gooley guy. You really love Gooley. But who do you expect to take steps this year? 82 games from now. Who is going to say, I'm a Canadiens defenseman long term?
Well, Lane Hutson definitely is going to. And I know there's a lot of buzz, a lot of hype. Not that there's ever been hype about a rookie coming into Montreal. I know you guys are not used to that. But this kid, what he can do, and I think a lot of people have been exposed to it in the preseason and also in the rookie camp. I get to watch him practice on a daily basis, which is somewhat of a privilege. The things that he can do, he's not a conventional skater. It's a little strange watching the way he moves around, but he is so shifty and manipulative that he's blowing his teammates away. And I just think this kid is entering the league with star quality already, there's going to be nights where he gets blown up, he gets hit, he ends up on the minus side of the ledger. But I think what he can do with the puck, and also certain parts of his game defensively, which probably don't get enough credit, the way he angles guys off, the way he pushes them into uncomfortable space, the way he uses his stick, I just think the positive is so far going to outweigh the negative in his case that people who think he might be in the race for the Calder, I don't think they're out of touch with reality on that. You look at Struble, you look at Xhekaj, there's a good race between those two players. Justin Barron, when he was traded for Artturi Lehkonen, came over with a lot of offensive promise. You talk to the guys who play with him in the offseason, Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, Brad Marchand, among them out east, and they are believers in the player. And I just think he hasn't put it together so far throughout his young NHL career. And then you remember that he's still pretty young and has around 100 games of NHL experience under his belt. So you look at those guys, the Ghoulies, Barron, Struble, Xhekaj, are they going to take that pivotal step that they need to take with that experience under their belt? Because if they can, I see a good mix between what they have. I think they're better than the sum of their parts is better than the individual components, especially with Mike Matheson and David Savard as the veteran anchors there.
All right. So based on that, Canadiens, playoff team, Angles, are they a playoff team?
Oh, man. I think...
Kyle,
I know
that's a no.
Well, I'm undecided. Like I was saying to you,
oh
Elliot.
My God! This isn't the Waffle House. This isn't the Waffle House. Come on.
All right. So
Erik,
you want me to make a bold prediction like Elliot did, just to be bold instead of giving any kind of reasoning as to why he's picking?
I'm sorry, I didn't realize this was the soft section of the show.
That's right.
I will predict
Egyptian
the Canadiens.
Only.
I will predict the Canadiens will finish ahead of the Ottawa Senators in the standings, even with Line out for 2 to 3 months.
Okay.
Well, that's not nothing. I appreciate it. I appreciate you giving us something there, Erik.
Well, Elliot thinks we're going to make the playoffs, right? So
Ottawa, yes, I do. You're right.
I guess that means I think Montreal has a better chance of making the playoffs than Ottawa does.
Okay, that's fair. That's something.
Last one for me, Erik, quickly. Joshua Waugh. I mean, I really liked watching him last year when he got hot there for a bit. Like, what's realistic in terms of a type of growth season he could have?
You're asking me a hot button question because his camp has been somewhat pedestrian, and his worst game of the preseason came in the very last one, right on the cusp of the Canadiens making some serious decisions. And when you look at what Oliver Kapanen and Emil Heineman were able to prove throughout this camp, in Kapanen's case, the Canadiens aren't in a rush to move him back to Sweden. They have until December to essentially make that decision, and Laine's injury buys them more time to evaluate the player further after he showed some really good stuff throughout the preseason and throughout training camp. In Heineman's case, as 22 years old, the guy who was traded to Montreal, you just see that a year of North American hockey brought him to a place where he could be a player that's on this roster. And I know that when this gets released, we won't have clear answers yet in terms of what the roster will be with the 5 p.m. deadline. But in terms of why, it seems as though he's played himself into that conversation. And I think Alex Barré-Boulet has the likelihood of being on the roster, which means one of Heineman or Roy could end up in Laval to start the season. I still think this player is going to be a real quality player. You saw what he could do with the World Juniors with a guy like Connor Bedard next to him. He has an elite hockey sense. He's a competitive player. He can play in all situations, but he's still young. And there are steps for him to take in order to prove that he could be a regular guy. And I think if he goes through that humbling experience of having to go down, not that I'm expecting that necessarily, I think he'll come back up playing ready to be a solid contributor to this lineup.
Great. Erik, thank you for your brave prediction and your insight. We'll see you this week in Montreal.
Yeah, take care, guys.
All right, to Toronto next. Luke Fox, lead writer for the Maple Leafs for Sportsnet.ca, joins us here now. So, Luke, first off, how are you doing? How are you feeling about things around the blue and white after training camp, new coach, new captain, and Austin Matthews? And I'm sure plenty of new feelings around how people anticipate things will go with the Leafs as there are every year. What's your sense of everything right now?
Well, you mentioned it in new coach. I think that's the biggest difference at Maple Leafs camp this year. Sheldon Keefe didn't run an easy camp, but I'll give you an example of how things work. The day one, there was a lot of conditioning, just incredible bag skating, and that's how he tired the guys out. Day one of Craig Berube's camp, for one, he turned off the music. There's no DJ at practice anymore. But the big thing was the number of battle drills, just the amount of body contact in the first day of on ice at camp. That really stuck out. And he has been preaching a very simple message, but a very clear message, that he wants these guys to finish every check, that he wants them to play north-south, that he absolutely demands they get back on defense, absolutely demands that they compete. And that kind of has been the tone of camp. That's the biggest difference. And, time will tell, because I think Sheldon Keefe's a good coach, if this actually improves the team. But they're going to play different, or he's going to want them to play different. That's the big thing that feels different, because they didn't really make any massive changes to the core of the roster.
So when I look at this team, I think they had a pretty good offseason. I liked a lot of their moves. My biggest question is Wool. Not because I don't think he's good enough, I do, but because he hasn't been able to stay healthy. In your mind, is this the year he puts it all together and grabs the number one spot?
It's going to be his to grab. And we saw that by him getting the start in the final preseason game, which is, as close to a dress rehearsal for the real thing as you're going to see. And he was absolutely solid. I mean, they were playing the Grand Rapids Griffins, but he made a couple cross-crease saves that were phenomenal. And he says he feels good. And you just kind of cross your fingers and hope that whatever they did differently over the summer in terms of his training, he spent a little more time in Toronto with the Leafs guys than he normally does, that he's going to be built for this. I mean, do I know if he's going to get hurt? I don't. But
what? How can you not know that? That's pathetic reporting.
But I will tell you this: every time he winces or something, everyone's kind of on alert because of his history. So there's going to be a lot of attention paid if he gets up slow, right?
That's true.
Stretches out to make a save. And the other thing is Stolar's had a fantastic camp.
Yeah,
the guy was
good
stellar.
Goalie.
He's a good goalie. And the Leafs season starts with a back-to-back, so they're each going to get one start. I would safely assume that Wool starts at the Bell Center Wednesday, and Stolarz gets the Sheldon Keefe Bowl Thursday in Jersey. And say Stolarz has a much better game than Wool. This market, all of a sudden there's going to be a goalie controversy in week one.
So I want to ask about Nylander. Why was the center experiment abandoned so quickly once again, despite a new head coach in charge?
I think it's the player. I think coaches don't trust this player to play center. He says that he needs to work on his faceoffs and he needs to work on his defensive positioning. There were a couple times in the preseason games where, he looked a little bit lost. It's not natural to him. Yeah, he played center with the Marlies and as a kid, but this is year 9 of his NHL career. And I mean, maybe you guys can recall an instance of this happening, but has there ever been an all-star winger that switches to center semi-permanently at this stage in his career? I can't think of one. I mean, someone mentioned to me that Mark Messier did it, but that was after only a few years. And
the only guy I can think of, and it's a completely different era, and it's not even the same position, is Red Kelly, who went from a Norris Trophy winning defenseman to like a center with the Maple Leafs and won 4 more Stanley Cups. But that's the only guy I can think of off the top of my head.
But I love
going back a ways.
Yeah, I love how you preface it though, saying this in no way relates to what Luke is asking about. I'm just going to tell you what I know.
That's right. That's the pod in a nutshell, Kyle. That's the pod in a nutshell.
That's great. Yeah, sorry, Luke. Go ahead.
No. Just the funny thing was at camp, Nylander seemed to take a friendly shot at Keefe when I asked him why the experiment didn't last very long at last camp, and he said, "Well, you got to ask my coach about that." But here we got another coach, and it's the same thing. So, I think they're hoping maybe he becomes an option if they need him. But I think he's proven he's one of the best wingers in the game. He likes to blow the zone and stretch it out and get breakaways. And we all know defense is not his strongest suit. So they're going to try and work with him at it. But right now, the coach loves Pontus Holmberg. So all of a sudden, this guy who didn't make the didn't make the team out of camp rather last year is poised to be the third line center. And we're back to kind of status quo with Tavares and Nylander as a duo.
Okay, here's my 2 yes or no questions to wrap it up for me. Number 1, do the Maple Leafs win 2 rounds in the playoffs this year? Number 2, does Mitch Marner re-sign with Toronto?
Wow, jeez.
Oh, I'm going to sound like a hater, but I'm going to say no to the first one, and I'm going to say yes to the second one.
At least you took a stand, unlike some other people on this podcast. At least you took a stand. I like that.
Way less hesitation, Luke. We'll give you credit for that, for sure.
That's right, yes.
My last one, there's a reason why your handle on social is Luke Fox Jukebox. What is scratching your ears right now musically? What's at the top of your playlist these days?
Oh, I appreciate the question there, Kyle. I've been listening to a lot of Griselda. There's an underground kind of rap crew from Buffalo.
Wow.
Particularly Benny the Butcher. I like him a lot. I've been listening to that. But yeah, I'm always looking for new stuff. And the new Talib Kweli is actually pretty good too. And the new, what's good? He's old, but he actually put out a good album. Is LL Cool J. Q-Tip from Tribe Called Quest produced the whole thing, and that's been pretty good too.
Phenomenal.
I got some stuff to Google. I wrote it down. I'm looking up Griselda right now. I'm actually doing it.
Terrific.
All right.
Luke, appreciate the time. We'll see you opening night.
Okay. Thanks for having me, guys.
Okay, to the West Coast next. Ian McIntyre of Sportsnet.ca joins us now. Ian, nice to have you on. So Quinn Hughes, a monster season a year ago, captain of the Canucks, Norris Trophy. What does he have for an encore this season, in your opinion?
Well, it's hard to think that the ceiling is higher, but Quinn Hughes, and maybe he's not so different than all the great players in this. He always believes there's another level. And the one thing about Quinn Hughes that I've learned in a very short period of time is to never doubt his ability to be even better. Because if you think about it, he came into the league and right away he was kind of a generational skater. Such an agile defenseman, incredible passer of the puck, but that's what he was regarded for. And then he didn't like that he wasn't regarded as a good defender. And so he really focused on being a good defender. And then, was part of this incredible class of defensemen who have all come into the NHL in a fairly short period of time. And he saw guys, Yossi's a little bit older than him, but Cale Makar was a rookie at the same time. And Adam Fox, who's a friend of his, won a Norris, and Quinn decided, well, I need to score more. I need to score more goals. I need to work on my shot. And last year he scores 17 goals. So he thinks that he can be an even better player than he was. I floated the idea to him, well, what about being a 100-point defenseman? Because Erik Karlsson's been the only one of those in the 21st century. And he didn't dismiss the idea, but
Great.
He did say that he thinks he should score more, and even though he had 17 last year, thinks he can get more this year. So we'll see. He's not a guy to be doubted. He's a world-class player, and I think is just now showing what he's really capable of, or at least last season showing what he's really capable of.
He is winning the Hart Trophy this year. That's my call.
Wow.
Yeah,
I like it. And you're not, and Elliotte, you're not the hot take guy.
Well,
you're
he's starting to become
generally very reasonable.
He's starting to become one.
Yeah.
Kyle is bringing it out of me. Kyle,
Yeah.
this is Kyle's influence on me.
Now, I got to ask quickly, how is Kyle working out, Elliotte? Is this going to work? Are you working on.
I'll let you know in
him
6 months.
in your
Ian. I'll
image.
let you know in 6 months.
I'm going to say, Dom, cut the feed.
Yeah, so, from what you understand, Ian, where does it stand right now with Demko? What do you think is going on here?
Yeah, obviously being cautious. I was talking about this somebody the other day, and that was tremendous what Demko did on the first day of training camp, because we haven't seen that from Thatcher. First of all, we haven't seen an openness by a player to discuss his absence the way that Thatcher wanted to. And this was his initiative to talk to reporters. This was the first day of camp in Penticton. But also that level of kind of engagement by Thatcher on any level, that was like a side of him. We saw a lot of that when he was coming into the league. We haven't seen much of that last couple of years. So that was great. The impression that I think most of us had from that availability was that although this has been a really difficult recovery from a very obscure injury, things were trending well, and that it might be a matter of time before we see him with the team. In fact, even that day that he spoke to us, day one of training camp, he was out on the ice himself ahead of time. So the ice a long time, but here we are now after the preseason, and we still haven't seen him with the team. So that part is disappointing. The reports, though, and Rick Tocchet has given a couple of updates, just that Thatcher continues to have good days, and that nothing has happened that makes them less optimistic that he's going to be back sometime fairly early in the season. But we still haven't seen him with the team. The biggest thing that's happened since Thatcher met with us that day at the start of camp, two things that happened. Arturs Shilovs has had a terrific preseason. He was excellent in all three of his games. He was the star of the one and only training camp scrimmage that the team staged. And then, of course, they went out, GM Patrick Allvin went out and got Kevin Lankinen. And Lankinen has looked really good in his couple of appearances. And suddenly this whole issue, which threatened really to cloud everything, it certainly overshadowed everything up to the start of training camp. It threatened to be this story that just hung over the Canucks, Thatcher Demko's absence. Suddenly it feels manageable, and the team is in a good position to start the season with Shilovs and Lankinen. Ultimately, they're going to need Thatcher. Whatever this team is going to achieve this season, whatever they're going to do in the playoffs, if they make the playoffs, they're going to need their Vezina runner-up goalie. But for now, I think Tocchet and the coaching staff, they're really comfortable. It's been really encouraging what Shilovs and Lankinen have shown in the preseason.
Okay, last one from me. What do you believe is standing in the way of a deeper run for the Canucks this year compared to last, if anything?
Well, I mean, there's details of the game. Their power play has to be more effective at key times. You can look at how much Elias Pettersson struggled in the playoffs, and he's looked very good in the preseason as well, playing with Jake DeBrusk and Daniel Sprong at the end of the preseason. Pettersson obviously is a difference maker, and if he is as good in the playoffs as he was, say, in the first half of last season, that's a huge thing as well. But I think the biggest thing, other than luck and health and your goaltending and all this, is they have more experience than what they had when they went in last year. And most of their youngish core players had never played real playoff games. They now have some real playoff experience. And I think the key is that obviously they need to use that. We all need to use the things we learn in life and hopefully be better because of it. But again, because it's a young group, they have to understand that they haven't done anything yet. And I think that's the theme within that dressing room as the regular season approaches, is that, last year And JT Miller said it to me in an interview that everybody tells him how great last year was, but last year is now last year. And however good it was last year, that's not what this group is aiming for. They're not starting the season planning to be a second round playoff team. They want to win a Stanley Cup. So if they can take the experience that they got last year and then kind of pair it to focus and intensity and really pushing themselves forward and not allowing complacency or satisfaction, don't take anything for granted, and just play with that sort of relentless edginess, that urgency to get back there and beyond, I think this team can go further this year than they did last year.
Okay, one word answer. Am I nuts?
Yes.
But I think the Canucks can win this. Good answer, but let's wait for the rest of the question. Am I nuts? But I think the Canucks can win the Stanley Cup this year.
Well, I don't know how to do that in one word, but you're not nuts.
There you go.
The Canucks can win the Stanley Cup this year. So can the Edmonton Oilers, and they're in the same division.
I understand
it's going to be it's going to be a great fight. But yes, and I'll say one other thing. I know you wanted a quick answer, but the team is desperate to go into the season maintaining the tiny bit of salary cap space that this regime has never had. And if they can do that, they will add another player or two along the way. So this team is going to be stronger, should be stronger at the end of the year than what we see now. So yes, it has the capability of winning a Stanley Cup.
Great.
Awesome.
You're
Great.
not nuts.
I'm glad to hear that.
Jury's still out on that part, but Ian, we appreciate it. See you down the road.
All right. Pleasure being on with you guys. Good luck with the show.
Thanks very much, Ian. Have
you.
a great season. See you throughout the year.
All right, to Winnipeg next. So pleased to be joined by Jacob Stoller, one of our new members of the Sportsnet.ca cast of writers covering the Jets this season. Jacob, welcome aboard. First off, what's your read on things in Winnipeg after a relatively quiet offseason in terms of the different moves that they made? What is your sense of the Jets right now?
Well, for a second straight year, they've got a lot to prove. It's different. Last year, they kind of were a big surprise in coming out of the gate and being, atop the Western Conference. And then there was the whole fraud stuff, which the team really seemed to rally behind. And then, the playoffs come around and they falter as many kind of expected. And I remember one thing that stuck out to me was at the end of, would have been Game 5 or whenever the last game of the year they had in Winnipeg, Josh Morrissey was talking about how they needed to find an extra level. And like that group there. And while that is true, it's tough seeing after last year them swing and miss on bringing back Sean Monahan, Brendan Dillon. Elliotte said on another podcast how they were in on Adam Henrique. So they kind of strike out. And then Kevin Cheveldayoff says, this is a good time for youth. It looks like as of now, the youth haven't forced their hand. That is in Brad Lambert, Nikita Chibrikov. So you look at it and we're kind of back to square one. And square one being this team looks capable of being a playoff team, but nothing is really showing us, at least yet, that they're capable of being better or even as good as last year, because it can't just be Connor Hellebuyck. And last year, even the year before, was a prime example of that.
So I think the Jets are a playoff team, but I've got people disagreeing with me, Jacob. I'm a little surprised by how many people are disagreeing with me on this. How do you feel?
I'm not surprised to hear that, Elliotte. I think that the issue the Jets have right now is last season they were a self-proclaimed stingy 5-on-5 defensive team. And for the first half of the year, they were, by all means. They were top 5 in scoring chances against, top 10 expected goals against. Then the second half of the year, things really trailed off in both of those sectors, and that identity that they preached sort of crumbled. And then when you lose a Brendan Dillon, when there was the hope of Ville Heinola coming in, that's on pause for now. You look at the D-core, and it's not the most inspiring, and there's a lot of question marks there. So the one thing I will say though is it seems like Scott Arniel is really focused on trying to get more offense. During Rick Bowness's tenure, a big thing was that team defense, and I'm not saying they weren't going for offense, of course, but the power play this year, like that's a new look here. They have Nikolai Ehlers in the bumper role, Davis Payne, the new assistant. They're trying things, and it's preseason, guys, but it looks really good. Like there's a lot more movement. Last year was just a lot of hot potato. So the power play reconfiguration is definitely inspiring in a lot of ways. But the thing is, guys, the Central got a lot better this year, and the Jets remains to be seen. But if I'm chalking it up now, I don't think they're any better. They're probably worse than they were last year. There's so many unanswered questions that there's always this notion of, well, they have Connor Hellebuyck, anything can happen. But guys, he said it last year, like he can't do this on his own. And that's not to say he was throwing anyone under the bus, but what he was saying was going into game 4, he thought he was going to steal a game. And he thought he was playing well, but just the amount of volume of chances he was facing, especially after a heavy, if not the heaviest workload during the year, it's impossible for it just to be Connor Hellebuyck. So they need to find advantages in other areas. And so for that reason, Elliotte, I'm really not surprised to hear people down on the Jets this year.
Okay, so you mentioned Scott Arniel trying to have a bit more of an offensive-minded focus coming into the year. With that in mind, Jacob, what player do you believe stands to benefit the most from that, and maybe a young player that could be poised for a breakout year in your mind?
Well, I think that heading into camp, we all thought it was going to be Brad Lambert, and for good reason. Brad Lambert has made tremendous growth in the last 2 years. Coming in, the 2022 draft, he slipped. There was a lot of concerns about his game. He has really risen his stock. But as of right now, the last practice we saw, and in the final preseason game he didn't dress, he's been an extra. So I'm not ruling out Brad Lambert benefiting from this, because the reality is Scott Arniel has experimented with different types of lineups. He's experimented with running a more balanced top 9. He had a practice line of Nino Niederreiter, Brad Lambert, and Alex Iafallo, which would be the best possible line mates for Brad Lambert if he was in the NHL, because you're not forcing him to be a top 6 center right away. You're giving him 2 wingers in Niederreiter and Iafallo who can do the dirty work in the corners, retrieve pucks, and also provide some offensive ability as well. So the spot is there for Brad Lambert if he's able to prove it. But for now, I don't know if that's going to happen. One guy, though, Kyle, I think is really going to benefit is Nikolai Ehlers. There's a lot of talk in this market about how Ehlers has been kind of, shafted for opportunity in years past. It's kind of common knowledge now that, Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor are kind of a cemented duo there. And Ehlers hasn't had the line mates really to get the most out of him on that second line. But I think with putting him on the bumper role and the power play, and I'm really high on Cole Perfetti. So actually, maybe that's what I should have said. But I think Cole Perfetti and his cerebral nature and facilitating abilities will help in Ehlers. And I guess while we're on it, Cole Perfetti might be, it's long-winded here, but Cole Perfetti might be the person that will benefit the most. Scott Arniel talked to him a lot during the offseason about how Perfetti, who was scratched last year during the playoffs, is going to be a big part of their team this year. And I have no reason to believe that he's going to backtrack on that. And I think Perfetti can come out and be a solid top 6 forward and kind of flirt with the 50-point mark, to be honest.
So I like Lambert. I mean, to me, Perfetti's an NHL player, but I liked what I saw from Lambert this year. Like, I agree with you. I think he's shown me, to me, that kid, whatever happens in Winnipeg, that could turn out to be one of the steals of the draft. I'm becoming a bigger and bigger Lambert fan. So here's my question to you, Jacob. I'm putting everybody on the spot with one question. At the trade deadline this year, is Nick Ehlers a Jet?
No. I think that the Jets at that point will be similar to where they were when they traded Andrew Kopp, and that is around 4 or 5 points out of the playoff picture. I think at that point, I don't believe Nikolai Ehlers is going to re-sign to be with the Winnipeg Jets. Don't think he doesn't like his time in Winnipeg, but after 10 years and becoming clear he's not going to be a first-line player here, I think he'll explore greener pastures. So I don't think Ehlers will be a Jet by that point. I think they'll sell, and I think they'll be forced to. They have no other choice at that point.
Great.
All right. I like it. A good prediction. No waffling. This is not the Waffle House. And a good prediction. I like
Jacob,
that.
great stuff. Again, welcome aboard, and we look forward to reading your coverage.
Welcome aboard, Jacob.
Thanks for the time.
Thanks, boys. Appreciate it.
All right, we will wrap up in the nation's capital. Another newbie of the Sportsnet.ca fleet of writers, Alex Adams, joins us here now. So, Alex, as you know, Elliotte went on national television at the beginning of preseason. He had the card in ink, Sens playoffs. What was your reaction when you saw that?
I thought he broke the internet. That was my first reaction. So I was pretty. I think for about 2 days, my timeline was filled with Elliott's face. So I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but it was definitely entertaining.
That's definitely outstanding. That's definitely excellent.
You recently spent some time one-on-one with Travis Green. The article's up on .ca right now for those that want to go read it. What was your takeaway from the conversation?
I think my first takeaway was just how much his focus is really on the defensive side of the game for the Senators team. Since Brady Tkachuk has entered the league, Tim Stützle, they've always been in the bottom third of the NHL in terms of goals allowed, and that's really been where Travis Green has focused throughout training camp. And that was really the one thing, was just a day-by-day process. They've been talking about process, structure. And I think with him, it was interesting. He talked to me how he's kind of changed from Vancouver in terms of maybe not running his team and his players into the ground, kind of taking more off days, even though he still provides those bag skates that are pretty infamous from his time in Vancouver. So overall, I think he's brought a new voice to this team, and at the same time, maybe more accountability for guys like Tim Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, Drake Batherson, and the lot to really focus in on that defensive side of their game that I think in the past years this team and their star players have really lacked.
The only thing that disappointed me about your interview with Travis is that you didn't steal something from his office on the way out. That's the only issue.
It was barren. I should have.
Well, actually, he's a bit of a minimalist, so I'm not surprised. Just from reading from outside, it just seems like the presence of Ullmark has really changed this team. And, defense, as you talked about there, is not only about the goalie, it's about the team. But what do you think that Ullmark, I know it's the preseason, but what do you think he's done to the group?
I think it's encapsulated with his comment last night, right? He's played well throughout all preseason, and just when asked, like, what does this mean for this team heading into the season, he just says we haven't accomplished anything, right? And I think what he's brought to this group, alongside some of the other veterans like Nick Cousins, Amadio, Perron, who have won cups as well, is just a day-by-day approach and not getting too high or too low, which I think this team in the past, they'd win a game and they'd get high and then they'd kind of ride the emotions and kind of lose themselves a little bit. And I think that's why they had poor starts to the season, and I think they got a bit ahead of themselves. And I think with Ullmark, obviously he's an amazing goaltender, with which this team has, for so long just been mired in awful goaltending. And now if Ullmark plays the way he has so far and how he, did in Boston, the team will have a goaltender that can really put them on top and into a playoff spot, but at the same time just brings the culture of winning from Boston that I think over the years with the Senators team, they've been so young and they haven't really had any veterans. I remember last year talking to Jacob Chychrun, and he said, it can't just be Brady and Claude that, step up and talk in the room. And I think now the Senators have brought in guys like Ullmark and others, veterans that can really help the young core move from, talented to a winning team as well.
Okay, so you and I were both at that game Saturday night when the Sens played Montreal to wrap up the preseason. And Travis Green post-game, he was asked about Shane Pinto. And among the things that he said was he believes he's a guy that somewhere down the road is going to have a really deep understanding of the game because of how knowledgeable and inquisitive he is now. And also suggested this is a guy very quickly, I think as soon as this year, is going to be someone he's going to rely on in all situations. He's my kind of pick for breakout player on the Sens this year. Who's yours?
I think for me, it's really Greg. And if we just go on, the Habs-Sens rivalry from last night as well, obviously there's a lot of animosity between the teams. But, talking to him, he's talked about how he's really improved his strength and really feels like he's learning the game at the NHL level. And I think, he's really feisty. He's a really smart player. He can facilitate, but he has a good shot as well. And I think that's one player that if he's on the second line with the guy like maybe Josh Norris and Drake Batherson, that he can really thrive at facilitating and helping those guys get good opportunities, but also, maybe take a bit of a step on his offensive side of the game, and can also penalty kill. And he's just kind of a man that can do a bunch of different things. And I think that's what this team needs.
Okay, so by the way, I'm just curious, when the Canadians play the Senators, do the media fight each other too, or just the players? Because I was looking at some of those tweets the other night, and it looked like things were getting spicy up in that press box.
Arpon Basu gave me a hug, so I think all is forgiven between Habs and Sens Twitter, I guess. I don't know, but
okay.
that's I think all is forgiven in the media side. We'll see about the two teams next Saturday.
Let's just wait to the next game. Yeah, what's that, Kyle?
I was going to say the spiciest thing that goes on in the press box at Sens games is intermission trivia. That gets heated.
Is it still going on all these years later?
You would love it.
Oh, that's awesome. It was there back when I used to go to more games, so it's fantastic. Okay, so you've heard my prediction. What's your prediction? Sens playoffs, yes or no?
I guess I need to get a picture of myself framed with a little card saying Sens playoffs, but I do believe that this team will make the playoffs. It will be a challenge. I think they're closer to that wild card team, but with Allmark, they have the goaltending that they've sorely missed from years prior. They've brought in the veterans that, will insulate the core, and I think just even with guys like Tim Stützle, who had a down year, Brady Tkachuk, entering their prime from, young 20-year-olds to kind of into their mid-20s. I think this team is ready to finally take a step with Travis Green, and I think all the pieces are in place. But their division is a gauntlet, but at the same time, I do believe the Senators will make the playoffs.
All right, Alex, it's great to have you part of things. Thank you so much for joining us. Yes.
Welcome aboard,
Alex.
Alex.
Welcome aboard. And I'll see you guys soon.
All right, so that'll do it for the tour through Canada, all 7 Canadian markets touching on there, looking ahead to the start of the regular season. On Tuesday, you can call it the official North American opening night to the NHL schedule. Kraken and Blues, 4:30 Eastern, 1:30 Pacific. You can catch that on Sportsnet 360. The Stanley Cup champions, Florida Panthers, will raise their banner as they host Jeremy Swayman and the Boston Bruins, 7 o'clock Eastern on Sportsnet. That'll be followed by the inaugural Utah Hockey Club regular season game. They host the Chicago Blackhawks, Connor Bedard and company, 10 Eastern, also on Sportsnet. The Canadian side of opening night with Scotiabank Wednesday Night Hockey comes the night following, getting underway with Toronto and Montreal from La Belle Province. Have a great week, everyone. Enjoy the regular season hockey that is back. We will talk to you again on Friday.